Fantastic. Good morning. It's 9:07, and I am Leah Tate, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Psychology to order. Ms. Pruteau, can you please call the roll?
Kasuga. Cervantes.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Here.
Nystrom. Here. Phillips.
Here.
Riscate.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you, and quorum is established. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. I'm Leah Tate, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the two-day February meeting of the Board of Psychology. We are very glad you're here with us today. Our two-day meeting will be webcast, but will not be available on WebEx. And just a reminder, meeting materials are available online at the Board of Psychology website. I would like to remind everyone that you will see board members looking at computers, typing throughout the meeting today and tomorrow. All of our board meeting materials are on the computer. The Board of Psychology has utilized technology to decrease the amount of paper that we use for our meetings. And just to keep us focused for the next 2 days, the mission of the Board of Psychology is to protect consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulate the practice of psychology, and support the evolution of psychology. Continuing professional development, or CPD, credit will be available today for attending this meeting. Today and in the future. Please make sure you sign in and out, and so that you can earn the appropriate amount of credit. And I love seeing all the new faces, and I'm sure that all of you are here because you want to spend time with us and not for CPD credit today. Is that correct? Right. I don't see Lizelle. Is Lizelle in here right now? Oh, hi, Lizelle. So wave again. So this is the person, if you have any questions about CPD, check in with her at the break. I know there are questions, and we'd love to get them answered for you. And last, but definitely not least, I'd like to welcome Dr. Shakanda Rogers as the newly elected Board of Psychology Vice President to the leadership team. Is there any board comment on the President's welcome this morning? Any public comment on the President's welcome? If you do have a comment, please come forward and have a seat. I do not see any movement, so I'm moving on to agenda item number 3. This is public comment for items not on the agenda. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. The board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Before I invite speakers to come forward for public comment, I would ask individuals making comments to not discuss specifics, including names as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. This refers to pending complaints and possible future complaints. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as it could provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. While there may be a desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss this. Although this may give the impression we're not being responsive, these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. And in addition, if there is a speaker before you who expresses thoughts who are extremely similar to yours, please feel free to verbally agree with the previous speakers instead of repeating the exact same comments, please. If you have a comment, please have a seat in front of the microphone, and each speaker will have 2 minutes. This is your time if you have public comment for items not on the agenda. I do not see any movement. I see a little movement, but okay. Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item number 4. This is the President's report. And Dr. Shakanda Rogers will be leading us.
Or so, I just wanted us to take a collective pause to hold space for all that we've been through in the last few weeks. Our state has endured some treacherous storms, which has wreaked havoc throughout the state. We've had a number of shootings in the state and loss of life. And then nationally, we've also witnessed police brutality and its impact on the Black community. So with all of that, in addition to whatever we may be carrying in our day-to-day lives, I think it's just worth a moment of pause to bring ourselves into this moment and to create space for whatever we might be carrying. And so as I was thinking about the practice that I wanted to share today, I've been thinking a lot about Martin Luther King Jr. It is Black History Month. And one of the terms that he used has just been landing on my heart in the last month or so. And he talked about the concept of beloved community. And so I had my own ideas of what that was, but I decided to look it up just so I would be sure. And simply put, beloved community is a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. I think there has been a lot of division, chaos, overwhelm, disruption, all of those things that can separate us. So I think that it's really a position so that we can center our minds and hearts on the practice of just like me. Feel free to keep your eyes open. You can close your eyes. You can lower your gaze, whatever feels most supportive for you. I'll set the timer, and then at the end of the practice, I will ring this bell 3 times. And so when you have heard that 3 times, that signifies the end of the practice. And this practice comes from Stephen Hickman, who was once the director of the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. And so we will begin. Taking some time to settle into your body for a few moments. Allowing your attention to drop inside. So whatever took place before we all gathered together, allow that to fall away. And whatever awaits you on the other side of this gathering, let that also fall away, so that you can be present in the palace of the present moment. Taking note of whatever is present in the way of sensation inside your body. You might notice the touch of clothing, the pressure of the supporting surface on certain parts of your body, or just sensations of coolness or warmth, relaxation or tension, ease or discomfort. Taking note of where and how you are in this moment. You may notice the movement of breath into and out of the body as well. Recognizing that the breath has continued to move on its own since you last attended to it. The truth is, our bodies have been breathing us for a lifetime. Now imagining someone whom you hold dear, someone who brings a smile to your face when you think of them, someone with whom you have a relatively easy and uncomplicated relationship. This may be a family member, like a child, a parent, a grandparent, maybe a pet, perhaps a partner. Try to go beyond the idea of this being and see if you can actually feel what it feels like to be in their presence. And stay with this for a moment. Notice any pleasant feelings that may arise as you hold this beloved being in your awareness. And see how easy it is to acknowledge that they too have the same aspiration for genuine happiness that you have. And if your mind wanders, just bring it back to the breath and the body. Now call to mind someone else. Someone that you recognize but don't have much meaningful interaction with and don't feel any particular closeness to. We call this the neutral person. This may be a person whom you see quite often, maybe on the street, behind the counter at your favorite coffee shop. The person who checks your groceries out. Maybe it's the mailman. Notice what feelings arise for you as you picture this person and how these feelings may be different from what you felt in regard to the loved one you imagined first. See if you can imagine what it might be like to be this person. Usually we don't give much thought to the happiness of people in neutral roles in our lives like this. Imagine their life, their hopes and fears, which are every bit as real, complex and challenging as yours. You might even recognize a certain similarity between yourself and this other person at the level of your common and shared humanity. Just like me, this person wishes to be happy and to avoid suffering. Just like me, this person wants to be happy and to avoid suffering. Next, take some time to see if you can call to mind someone you don't know at all and who seems very much unlike you at first glance. Perhaps an image comes to mind from the news or in your imagination or from previous travels. Maybe consider someone who's facing hardships that are far different from your own right now. Perhaps you might consider someone from a different cultural background or life circumstances, someone who doesn't look like you. You may find yourself thinking just now of people suffering through war or resisting oppression. Take the time to see if you can look past the differences to what you have in common with this person. Imagine looking into their eyes, sitting with them in this mindfulness practice, feeling just a little of the joy and pain and sorrow and fear that they may experience, simply because they are human, just like you. See if you can put yourself in this person's shoes for a moment, recognizing that they are beloved by someone. They may be a parent, a spouse, partner, child, or dear friend of someone. Begin to acknowledge that even this person who seems so different has the same fundamental aspiration for happiness that you have. And allow your attention to rest here for a few moments. Just noticing what arises as you imagine this person that's so different from you. Finally, see if you can bring together these three people in one mental picture in front of you. Take some time to reflect on the fact that they all share a basic yearning to be happy and free from suffering. At this dimension, there is no difference between the three people. In this fundamental aspect, they are exactly the same. Just take the time to relate to these three beings from that perspective, from the point of view that they share the aspiration for happiness and to be free from suffering. Now, including yourself in this circle of awareness, reminding yourself that these people have feelings, thoughts, and emotions, just like me. These people, during their lives, have experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering, just like me. These people have been sad, disappointed, angry, or worried, just like me. These people have felt unworthy or inadequate at times, just like me. These people have longed for connection, purpose, and belonging, just like me. These people want to be happy and free from pain and suffering, just like me. These people want to be loved, just like me. With this deep recognition that the desires to be happy and to overcome suffering are common to all, silently repeat this phrase. Just like me, all others aspire to happiness and want to overcome suffering. Taking the time to sit with whatever wishes or feelings arise from this practice, allowing them to arise and fall away. Returning your attention back to the body and breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return your attention back into the room. Thank you for your practice.
Dr. Rogers, thank you so much for leading us in mindfulness this morning and providing a calm and reflective space for us before we attack this agenda. Before moving on to the next agenda item, I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that the calendar for the upcoming 2023 board meetings and committee meetings are in the agenda packet. And just for your information, our next full board meeting is on Friday, May 19th, 2023, and this will be a WebEx event. Is there any board comment regarding the president's report at this time? Thank you. Any public comment regarding the president's report? Please come forward and have a seat. Sounds good. Let's move on to agenda item number 5. This is the executive officer's report. Ms. Sorick, please.
Good morning. Included in the meeting materials is the executive officer report, which includes a staffing update as well as a waiver update. The board currently has 3 active waivers that are active dependent on the continued declared emergency, which is scheduled to conclude on February 28th. And I'm available for any questions.
Any board comment for Ms. Sorick? Any public comment for Ms. Sorick? Please come forward and have a seat in front of a microphone. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to agenda item number 6. This is the discussion and possible approval of the board meeting minutes for November 17th through 18th, 2022. Any board discussion, a motion?
Madam President Tate, I just bring to the board's attention that my name was not included on the list of board staff in attendance on page 13, if we could include that. Also on for item 28 on page 29, the nominations for positions of president and vice president should note that they were for the term of the 2023 calendar year. I also have just 2 minor typos that I caught in item 22, page 21. Line 365, there's a missing word "be" in the sentence "would be meeting in April 2023." And on item 25, on page 21, line 389, the reference to the commend period should be the comment period. That's all I have.
Ms. Berto, did you catch those changes? Enough.
Thank you, Ms. Berto.
Go ahead, Dr. Harpsheets.
I move that we accept these minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Perfect. So that is a motion by Dr. Harpsheets and a second by Ms. Nystrom. Any other board comment before I open this up? Any public comment regarding this item? This is the discussion of the board meeting minutes from November 2022. If you have any comments, please come forward and have a seat. Okay, bringing it back to the board. Any other board comments? Ms. Berto, can you please call the roll?
Cervantes. Aye. Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Nystrom. Phillips.
Aye.
Bruscate.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Agenda item number 7 is the Department of Consumer Affairs update. This will be provided by Yvonne Durantes, the Assistant Deputy Director, Board and Bureau Relations. Thank you and welcome. Good morning.
Are you able to hear me all right? Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. Thank you
Can
for
you get a little
allowing-
closer to the microphone?
Oh.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Perfect.
There we go. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity today to provide an update on the Department of Consumer Affairs. And so beginning with our new strategic plan and logo, DCA recently released its new 5-year strategic plan in November and officially transitioned to a new logo at the start of the new year of 2023. The new logo will be implemented gradually throughout the year, and existing items with previous DCA logo are still valid during the transition and do not need to be replaced or updated. DCA board and bureau leadership have been given information and resources to help with the new logo's implementation. A centralized website is also available at www.dca.ca.gov/logo. The new plan and logo represent the department's next chapter and future, with consumer protection continuing to guide our mission and priorities. DCA holds itself to a high standard as a licensing entity, regulator, educator, and service provider. Additionally, the plan incorporates our strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as our shared commitment to each consumer. The new logo not only displays California's official colors, but it also visually represents DCA's vision, together protecting California consumers. The shield symbolizes DCA's strong and long-standing protection mandate. The state symbolizes all 40 million Californians DCA has pledged and is honored to serve. The star symbolizes consumer protection as DCA's true guiding principle, its own North Star. For questions about the department's new strategic plan or logo, please contact Melissa Gear, Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations. DCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee update. At the end of last year, the department established its first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee, known as the DEI Committee, to guide the department's equity strategy, initiatives, and action plans. Comprised of DCA Board and Bureau leadership, the DEI Committee held its second meeting on January 27th and established the committee's charter, discussed changes to the strategic planning process, and developed a DEI fact sheet. Additional resources will be forthcoming that boards will be able to use and incorporate into their strategic plans and communications. The committee will concentrate on 3 key areas. Number 1, workforce, to find and keep diverse talent. Number 2, workplace to actively educate leaders and employees to raise awareness and foster an inclusive culture. And number 3, marketplace, to be sensitive to the diverse backgrounds and perspectives of consumers, applicants, and licensees. Strategic planning update. The department's DEI steering committee is working to implement the governor's executive order issued in September of last year, which directs state departments to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion into their strategic plans. DCA's SOLID team is working with the DEI steering committee to develop DEI-related questions for inclusion in environmental scan surveys and SWOT analysis to help guide the board and bureaus in developing DEI-related goals and objectives as part of their strategic plans. Sample DEI objectives will also be provided to further assist the board and bureaus. Additionally, DCA is developing video messages from leaders to explain their perspective on DEI and how it relates to the board's roles as regulators and policymakers. Once these new DEI components have been finalized and approved, SOLID will begin working with DCA's board and bureaus on the development of new strategic plans or updating of existing strategic plans. We will keep your executive officer updated as more information becomes available. Now is a great time to review all the necessary board member trainings and submit your certificates of completion to your executive officer and DCA at memberrelations@dca.ca.gov. So this is a reminder of your board member required trainings. There are 2 DCA mandatory trainings for 2023, and this includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. All DCA employees and appointees, including board members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training this year. This training is required every odd-numbered year and is approximately 2 hours. In addition, if you are assigned a DCA email, which is the dca.ca.gov, you are required to complete the Information Security Awareness Fundamentals 2023 training. Information Security Awareness training addresses everyone's role in protecting DCA data and information. The training is online and required every year. Both sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness trainings are available in the department's learning management system, which we commonly refer to as LMS. Both trainings can be accessed online at any time, and in the next few weeks, information will be sent out via email on how to access these trainings. Board members must complete Board Member Orientation Training, or BMOT, within the first year of appointment or reappointment. Ethics training within 6 months of appointment and every 2 years thereafter. And defensive driver training within the first year and every 4 years. For your convenience, these trainings are offered multiple times a year in a variety of formats. For more information, a mandatory trainings page has been created for help for members to identify, access, and track specified trainings. The page includes specifics to these training courses. The page is available via the DCA Board Members Resource Center page under the Required Board Member Training. You can also reach out to Melissa Gear or myself, Yvonne Durantes. President's Training, which will be held on February 22nd of 2023. And so DCA invites presidents and vice presidents to join the President's Training on February 22nd from 10 a.m. to noon. And this is a virtual 2-hour training which will outline the role of a board president, including understanding the scope of the role and managing board members and performing administrative duties. And so if you're interested, please sign up via LMS. With the end of the COVID-19 state of emergency, the COVID-19 state of emergency and associated executive orders, N3920 and N7520 will end on February 28th of this year. And upon the state of emergency ending, the remaining active waivers that DCA issued under the authority of the state of emergency will also expire on February 28th. Filing your annual Form 700 by March 15th of 2023. Board and committee members are required to file a statement of economic interest, also known as the Form 700, within 30 days of their appointment annually and within 30 days of leaving office. This year's annual filing period covers the prior calendar year, which is January 1st through December 31st of 2022. The official deadline for filing is Friday, April 1st of 2023. And to ensure compliance, DCA requests that Form 700 filers complete these e-filings by Friday, March 15th, 2023. And you should have recently received an email from NetFile with instructions on how to file your annual Form 700. And if you have any questions or would like more information, please contact Melissa Gear at dca.ca.gov. And so the board member orientation training mentioned earlier will also be on March 22nd of 2023. Board members must complete BMONT within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. And on March 22nd, BMONT will be offered as a live virtual day of training and possibly in person on June 20th of 2023, as well as October 10th of 2023. And more information will be available soon. Members can sign up using LMS. And so DCA and the BBR team look forward to working with you and happy to assist in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Antes. I've seen the logo, it looks good. I like that. And thank you for giving us an update on the DEI implementation of the steering committee. I appreciate that. And of course, thank you for the board training reminders, because I'm sure all of us will be in there somewhere at some point. Any other board member comment for Mr. Antes? Dr. Cervantes?
Oh, okay, there we go. I just want to thank you for being here. I see a marked improvement in the communication from DCA over the period that I've been on this board. In recent years, the communication has been thorough, timely, and engaging in that it helps me to see my role as a board member. And I just want to commend you and your folks at DCA for that. I think, I've worked in state government for a long time. We don't usually see positive change that fast. So I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Great. Happy to hear that. Yeah, and we are happy to assist and answer any questions. You can always reach us at memberrelations at dca.ca.gov to answer any questions or assist any way. You can also reach out to your EO, and she can reach out for any questions. And so happy to hear that. Thank you.
Any other board comment for Mr. Antes? Is there any public comment for Mr. Antes? If so, please come forward and have a seat. I don't see any public comment. Thank you, Mr. Antes. We appreciate you. We're moving on to agenda item number 8. This is the budget report, and we have Mr. Burke from the Board of Psychology along with from the DCA Budget Office. We have Karen Munoz, Sarah Hinkle, and, oh, no Matt, okay. Karen Munoz and Sarah Hinkle. You have the floor, go ahead.
President Tate, Vice President Rogers, board members. In the Governor's 22-23...
Can you move the microphone closer to you? Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Apologies. In the Governor's 2022-23 revised budget, after these changes, the board has an appropriation of $7,970,000. When the fiscal year 22-23 closes, the board is estimated to revert 8.33% of its budget, or $659,000. With me today to give a more in-depth overview of the budget, as is traditional at our February board meeting, is Karen Munoz, Board Manager at DCA, and Sarah Hinkle, who is the Board's Budget Analyst at DCA. Thank you.
Thank you.
And push it forward a little bit. We just want
Okay.
to be able to hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Hinkle, and with my budget manager, Karen Munoz. I just want to take a moment to thank you, the board and the executive staff, for allowing me a few minutes to provide you information on the budget process and also provide an update to the board's budget. So I will go over first the budget process and how it relates to the boards of fund and appropriation. So the budget process is a statewide process to how a budget is developed and ultimately enacted into law for state departments to adhere to on an annual basis. The first stage of this process is the development of the governor's budget, which occurs in the fall and released on January 10th. The governor's budget is planned a year ahead. For example, the recent release was for this fiscal year 2023-24. And during this stage, we would use your existing budget as a baseline to incrementally adjust it based on instructions provided by the Department of Finance, typically through budget letters. Some examples of adjustments that can impact the board's appropriation are salary and benefit adjustments that occur each year or budget change proposals. For the second stage, once the governor's budget's released on January 10th and introduced to the legislator, the budget office then assists the governor's administration to walk the legislator through the various adjustments that are being proposed. An example of this would be assisting and supporting the board in explaining their BCPs if a proposal is submitted. And once the legislator approves the governor's proposed budget, the budget is signed into law for the upcoming fiscal year, which is known as the Budget Act. And for example, the current budget was enacted into law in June 2022 per Chapter 43 Statutes of 2022, it's SB 154. And the final stage of the implementation of the budget, all boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs are supported by at least one special fund, so psychology's fund being 310. A special fund is an account separate from the state's general fund in which specified revenue is deposited. And the main revenue source for most boards is fees assessed to licensees. And additionally, the board's special fund is the source from which all authorized board expenditures are made. And so it's important to note that the board's fund balance is different from what the board is authorized to spend in any given year. And as referenced earlier, the board's budget appropriation is the budget approved in the Annual Budget Act, which becomes the appropriation for the corresponding fiscal year. An appropriation is the total amount of funds for which a board can make payments out of their special fund. And it's important to remember, boards are expressly prohibited from making expenditures in excess of this annual appropriation. It's also important to note any reversions from the board's appropriation, such as savings from the board's authorized expenditures in the fiscal year, are reverted back to the fund and not rolled over to the next year's appropriation. And as a reminder, board members have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the board maintains expenditures within their authorized appropriation and can do so by reviewing the board's budget reports and expenditure projections on a routine basis. And then as part of the board meeting materials, I've also included the board's fund condition and expenditure documents. And these are the documents that I'll be discussing today. So the first document I'll be going over is the board's expenditure projections. That's the colorful version. It looks like this. And the expenditure projections is a tool used to monitor the board's expenditures throughout the fiscal year. These reports are updated on a monthly basis and provides an opportunity to see how the board is expending its funds, with all expenses broken out into categories such as salaries, benefits, travels, facilities, and equipment expenses, to name a few. So for some clarity, when reviewing the expenditures report, the top half of the document are the board's personnel service expenses, and followed by the board's operating expenses at the bottom. The first column in green, These are prior year 21-22 actuals. The next columns over in blue, these are the board's current year 22-23 budget. Budget and year-to-date expenditures. And then the orange column, these are the board's projections to year end. These projections are based on various different methods such as contracts, prior year expenditures, and then also information that's gathered from board staff. And if you want to bring your attention to the bottom of the document, you'll see that the board has an appropriation of just over 7.9 million, and then it's projected to spend 7.2 million. And based upon these projections, the board is projecting to revert almost 660,000. And as mentioned, the budget office will continue to monitor these expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as future months close. $8 million. The board collected close to 4.6 million in revenue and expended approximately 6.3 million in expenditures, plus an additional 443,000 in direct draws from the fund to support statewide expenses such as supplemental pension payments and statewide pro rata for a total expense of just over 6.7 million. The board ended 21-22 with approximately 6.3 million in reserve balance, or about 9.7 months in reserve. Months in reserves is the amount of time the board can continue normal operations without any incoming revenues. The 6.3 million reserve then moves to the top of the column of the fund condition, and it becomes the beginning balance for the current year 22-23. For the current year, and based on the fiscal month 5 data, the board projects an estimate of 5.9 million in revenue. The fund is also showing a scheduled 900,000 general fund loan repayment. The board's current year expenditures, again as of fiscal month 5, are projected to be approximately 7.2 million, with an additional direct fund cost of approximately 550,000. For a total projected expenditure of 7.8 million. The board's fund is projecting an imbalance with negative reserves by the end of 24-25. And although the current fund condition does include the recent regulatory fee increase, it does not include proposed statutory fee increases, which were previously approved by the board and will be proposed in the upcoming legislative session. The proposed changes are projected to increase revenues by 2.9 to 6 million per year. So, the budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenues and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projections as we begin closing fiscal months in the current fiscal year. The fund condition, I just want a few things to note, is that the fund condition is a snapshot in time. And one of the main factors driving expenditure increases in future years is results of personnel service adjustments. These include general salary increases as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. And the fund condition does not include increased enforcement expenditures, which could create additional cost pressures to the board's fund in in out years. Funds will traditionally show a decrease in months in reserves due to the conservative projected method displayed in the fund condition. In budget year +1 expenditures are projected with an ongoing 3% increase, and revenues remain stagnant. And lastly, we would like to note to the board that any future legislation or unanticipated revenues events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would increase pressures on the fund. The Budget Office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep the line of communications with the board executive, staff, and for any future needs or expectations. So that this time it concludes my presentation, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for going through it slowly so I think everyone could follow, and I appreciate that. Any board comments or questions? Mr. Fu?
Thank you for your time. I just want to turn to page 35 of the packet total. My understanding is that we have a reversion of $659,000, and I think your expenditures budgeted and actuals are flipped, because right now it's showing on that chart we're actually not reverting. Is that correct for the 22-23 year?
It might be this document he's looking at.
Oh, are you you said page?
Yes. So if I'm reading correctly, if our reversion is $659,000, shouldn't our total expenditures be less than our budgeted expenditures? In that last column for 22-23?
There's a possibility that they could be flipped. We'll go ahead and research and look at that right now.
Right.
I'll
Because
pull it up.
my understanding is that we've had a reversion almost every year, and so this chart is indicating that we're actually not reverting 659, that we're actually deficit of 659.
That is correct.
Oh, yes, we see that.
So, heeding the call for fiduciary responsibility, just wanting to clarify
Yes,
that we are actually reverting 659 and not deficit.
correct. Sorry about that. It should be it is a reversion.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm assuming.
And we will correct that.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the second question I had with regard to the presentation is that the proposed budget has a 27.2 FTE, I believe, and that does not reflect the BCP that will be submitted between now and May. Is that correct?
Any BCPs that you've submitted for the current, for now?
For the projected fiscal year of 23-24.
There's one BCP that's in the governor's budget for the board, and that is for dollars only, no positions. So is that what you're referring to as positions?
Yes.
Yeah, no positions were requested in 23-24 for the current BCP cycle that's in the governor's budget. It was only $140,000 for a BCP, one-time cost.
Understood. And I think we had a position BCP in years past, so that was reflected probably in 21-22 to 22-23.
There was a phased-in position. I can see if that was phased in final for 22-23 or 23-24, where you got one position in 1 year, and then the following year you received a second. But I will look at that one up right now. I think that was in the summary that we provided.
Got it. And then my last question was the estimated projections with regard to the statutory changes that we're seeking. I think I heard that the estimate was somewhere between $2.9 to $6 million, and I'm curious to understand the large variance between the large range of those numbers relative to the fund condition. And I'll add one more comment to that, is because I think that does affect when we look at our budgets, looking at the fund condition, recognizing that it's essentially a balance statement, point in time perspective, that does affect how we look at our fund balance depending on that range. So action would need to be taken sooner rather than later if it's 2.9 million versus 6 million. So curious to understand that range.
So the range, when we're identifying the 2.9 and the 6, so I understand how that could be confusing. Usually through legislation, when fees become effective, it's January 1st. So the 2.9 is a half-year projection, and the 6 million would be a full-year fee increase for the following year.
That's really helpful clarification. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, no worries. I think those are questions that I have for now. Thank you, Madam President.
I could address the position count. That position was received in 22-23, so you have the full position count in this year and then moving forward. So no additional positions for 23-24 at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. I love your financial insight all the time. Any other board comment, please? Dr. Cervantes?
In opening this report, you shared some definitions of terms. Could that be sent to us as a follow-up item so that we could better understand the context of the terms that we're looking at? And I have a question. And you explained some of it in the definitions, but I wasn't entirely sure, so let me just ask my question. You explained that there is, in the Budget Act, there's a budget that's allocated, but we have, what is our limitation of what we are allowed to spend on what's allocated in the budget?
So so every year the board receives an appropriation that they can
Appropriation,
expend
sorry,
to.
I used the wrong
And
word.
that amount is different than what your fund balance is. It's more, I look at more as a checking account and a savings account. So the fund itself is your savings account. It's everything within there. And then your checking account is that one number. If I can, 7.9 million, or what's the budget for you? I know I have glasses, but they don't really work with color. 7.9 million. So 7.9 million is going to be the appropriation that the board can actually expend to, which are the personal services, any of those operating expenses. And then the fund balance might be different. And so that's where a little bit of the confusion may land when you're looking at a fund condition. But there are those two different terms. So you have a fund balance, which is what remains in your savings or checking account after all expenses are spent. So
Yeah.
the dollars coming in from revenue minus the expenditures and your appropriation. And that is what we build through the fall process for expenditures, and we create essentially your appropriation to spend to.
It would be helpful to have the definition of terms so that we can have some added context as we're analyzing the reports. Or it
Absolutely.
would be for me.
We can get that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cervantes. Sorry, Mr. Fu.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make one more comment, which was a comment in your presentation that struck me was the fiduciary responsibility piece of the board, and I think that's something that I know we've taken very seriously. Dr. Phillips and I having gone through the 2018-19 cycle. And the comment I would like to make is I really do appreciate the ongoing relationship between the DCA Budget Office and the board staff to provide more timely updates with regard to how our expenditures are lining up with the budget and actuals. I think if you look at over the last 3 fiscal years, as that communication has improved, I don't think it's surprising that the reversion has increased as we've updated as the state has finished or is continuing to work on its technology systems to provide us that information. But I do want to just make a note that that communication is essential because this board can't operate its fiduciary responsibility without that communication. And I really am grateful that, particularly over the last 3 fiscal years, that has improved to the extent which we're able to have this information. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and I agree as well. Do you have a comment, Dr. Phillips?
Yes. So when you talk about the checking account includes the revenue that we generate by way of our licensing fees primarily, But it also includes the amount that we've been allocated out of the psychology fund, the general fund, the savings account. Is that correct? I don't understand how we're in a structural deficit, and this is my simplistic way of thinking about it, if we're always reverting money back to the fund.
So when we look at a structural deficit, so you do revert money back to the fund, but it has not been equivalent to what the revenue has been brought in for that fiscal year. So any fiscal year, if you, for example, if you bring in, and what are we projecting here, for example? In current year, based on fiscal month 5 data, we're projected to bring in a total revenue of 5.8 million. And we're expecting to bring in expend 7.8 million, and that includes those direct draws of pension payments and statewide pro rata. So that is that deficit.
And that money, the additional money in the checking account that we have available to spend on our budget for the year,
Yes.
our total budgeted expenditures, is coming out of the psychology fund.
All of this is out of the psychology fund. So everything,
Everything goes into the savings
Everything
account
goes
before
in.
it goes to the checking account.
yes,
So our revenues are being outstripped by our expenditures,
correct.
which is why the savings account is shrinking. Because I think the impression it gives when we talk about reversion is that, oh, we've saved money this year, we're putting money into the psychology fund, and all we're really doing is returning money to the psychology fund that was there in the first place.
Correct, and any savings, whenever we're looking at a structural imbalance or a deficit in the fund, any savings will only help the fund. But when we're looking at it in the wide picture, if the revenues coming in is still underpacing what's being spent, then there will be a deficit. But I know that there is a plan in place for the 24-25 year that will significantly change that. And so the revenues will then become greater than the expenditures to realign your fund more to a balance.
So the savings account is shrinking, and we're being responsible in spending under the amount of money that's been allocated to us.
Correct.
Okay. That's very clarifying for me, because sometimes when I read these things, I see a reversion, I get a little confused by it.
Right.
But then when you realize it's money that's from the fund that's being returned to the fund,
Right.
it's not so
Yes.
exciting.
So the appropriation, you're given $7.9 million to spend every year, but it doesn't mean that you fiscally should be spending that. We want to find some savings wherever we can to assist your fund. You know, if you spend less, then it would help, especially when we're not seeing the revenues coming in.
Well, I will say that the board executive officer and management is very conscious of that and has made us very conscious of it. And it was fun staying in a hotel last night.
As always, thank you for your comments, Dr. Phillips. Any other board comments? Dr. Cervantes?
I just have a quick question. I know we've talked about this before, but I can't remember right now. Our months in reserve, does the department have guidelines of how many months we should have in reserve? Or what should we aim for?
So there are, I'm not sure if this board specifically has a cap, if it's the 24, most boards and bureaus have a 24-month cap in reserves, but there are a few that are less, so I can't off the top of my head know if that's implies to the board. But typically, we like to see around 3 months. Anything less than that, depending on the size of the fund, because 3 months for one fund could be a huge difference for a different fund based on their balance. But typically, it's always been around 3 months in reserve. We've been trying to shy away from that and say that there's really no, because we don't have the department does not have like a minimum. There's one program that has a 2 to 4 month, and that is it. Everybody else there's no minimum. We just like to stay around the 3 to 6 to keep you healthy, but there's really nothing that says in statute that you have to, anything less than 3 months in reserve, we need to
assess it. But if anything drops around 3 months or lower, we do start those conversations with the board for future planning.
Any other board comment? I'd like to open it up for public comment. If anyone has a comment regarding this agenda item, can you please come forward? And I might have Mr. Burke give up his microphone. Is there any board comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any movement. Any other, sorry, no public comment movement. Any more board comment before we move on? Thank you for coming and answering our questions, and I hope we continue to have an ongoing positive relationship.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Thanks again. We're going to move on to agenda item number 9, and then we'll take a short break. This is the enforcement report with Ms. Monterrubio.
Good morning. So the enforcement agenda item 9 also includes the overview of enforcement activity, which conveys complaint, investigation, and discipline statistics for the current fiscal year. So some great news, the enforcement unit has filled their vacancies except one, but that person is on leave and will return May 1st. New staff has completed their training and they have been assigned a full caseload. Since July 1st, 2022, the board has received 526 complaints. All complaints received are opened and assigned to an analyst. We usually see a steady trend of 80 to 83 complaints per month, but we do see less complaints being submitted November and December, and that's most likely due to the holidays. Since July 1st, we have issued 20 enforcement citations, and again, enforcement citations are issued for minor violations. Since July 1st, we have referred 17 cases to the Office of the Attorney General for formal discipline. And we are currently monitoring 46 active probationers. Of those 46 probationers, 3 are out of compliance. And we are currently we currently have 19 told probationers. And again, attached to my report is the overview of enforcement activity. Does the board have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Monterrubio. I just wanted to say thank you for all of your hard work, and I'm super excited that you will be completely fully staffed in May. So
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Harbsheets.
Hi, I was just looking at the chart and I have a question. At the very bottom, it says enforcement data pulled on August 1st, 2022, but I'm thinking it might be more recent.
That is correct, and I do apologize. This data was pulled January 5th of
Okay.
2020.
All right, thanks.
Go ahead, Dr. Cervantes.
I just have a quick question. In your cover memo, you list 46 active probationers and 19 told probationers. Are the 19 told part of the 46?
They are not.
Oh, in addition to?
Correct.
Any other board comment for Ms. Monterrubio? I'd like to open it up for public comment regarding the enforcement report. If you have public comment, please come forward and have a seat, please. Does not appear we have public comment. Just open it up last time for the board. Any other comments from Ms. Monterrubio? Dr. Phillips.
I just wanted to say what a superlative job the enforcement staff and management has done in keeping it together when they were very shorthanded and keeping
Thank you. Ms. Pruitt, can you please call the roll?
Cervantes. Fu.
Aye.
Harb-Sheets.
Here.
Nystrom. Phillips.
Here.
Briscotte.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Tate.
Here.
Roll is complete.
Thank you. We will be taking up item number 10. This is licensing timeframes update, short-term and long-term solutions to the application backlogs. Mr. Burke, please. Thank you.
Good morning, President Tate, Vice President Rogers, members of the board. This is an update to an item which has been on the board's agenda since August. As you know, we had a low point of almost 12 to 14 weeks processing times for the various stages of licensure. This was due to sort of a medley of issues that our licensing unit was having at the time. Specifically, we'd lost 2 retired annuitants due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Those positions went away, sadly, as well as just there were quite a few vacancies, people leaving the unit and then hiring took time. So we went, at one point the unit was about 50%, and we saw almost a doubling of the time frame. So to keep ourselves accountable, we have a list of short-term and long-term solutions which we've implemented in an attempt to get those processing times reduced. The short-term solutions, we were able to hire 1 retired annuitant in April and an additional one in mid-October. We also transferred the special projects coordinator to help process various licensing types. And also we were able, despite our budget issues, we were able on a limited basis to approve some overtime for the licensing analysts so that they could help meet the backlog. Long term, these are more short-term solutions. The long-term solutions, we've made the pathways to licensure statutory changes. The pathways to licensure regulatory changes are next up for drafting. We plan to submit a BCP this spring. We'll be doing a concept paper in the next month or 2 to get some additional help in the licensing unit. We have redirected an office technician position from central services. That position is now aiding the licensing unit. And we also are transitioning to Paperlite and have made a number of system breeze changes, which have all helped. We think we've seen a positive impact in this area. Like I said, going from 12 to 14 weeks, we now see we're now in the 6 to 8 week time range, which is it's still not exactly where we want to be, but it is a positive movement. And we've seen a reduction in constituency calls, which is applicants contacting their legislator to say, it's been taking too long, I've been losing an employment opportunity. We've seen a great reduction in those. I haven't seen one in months, as well as a reduction in irate phone calls, emails, which sent to DCA or to the executive management team. So it's been really positive, the changes. And I have an update included in the packet. There is the processing times from January the 6th. It's a hand carry. We had updates for January the 20th, and I can present some updated timelines as of yesterday. So for the application EPPP eligibility out-of-state applicants, we're now processing applications received January the 3rd. COPLE request, December 21st. Request for initial licensure, December 21st. Supporting documents correspondence, December 21st. And on the psychological associate front, application January the 30th. Notification to add or change primary supervisor, January the 31st. And supporting documents correspondence, January the 30th. So that's within a week. This is a drastic improvement, and we hope to see it continue with the solutions that we've been implementing for the last 6 to 8 months. Are there any questions?
No questions, but I love the progress, and this was such a huge undertaking, and the improvement speaks for itself. So I know I've told Ms. Chung, but I'm also telling you, thank you, and what an amazing job. Any other board comments? Nope. Dr. Cervantes.
I've had several conversations with Ms. Chung and Ms. Sorick about my concerns about these issues, and I am I know Ms. Chung's not here at our meeting today, but I'm thoroughly impressed in her analysis of the problems and being able to find multi-pronged solutions, including improving the communications with applicants to help reduce that time of processing and the number of calls, which was also an incredible workload. And so I just, wow. In maybe about 5 months? Such a sharp turnaround. Thank you. Thank you for your help on this as well.
No problem. I feel rather bad. Ms. Chung was here when things were really bad, answering the tough questions, and I get to come in when things have improved.
That's the best position to be in.
That's right. That's my style. So, thank you.
Dr. Harpsheets?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, and maybe you could say the time frame again, Mr. Burke, that for psychological associates, those applications are being turned around so quickly. I just wanted to highlight that because that means we're getting people out in the system ready to see clients.
Yes, January the 30th, so same week.
Mr. Fu?
I'm going to join in the positive comments, and I just want to share an email that we did receive from an applicant who wrote to us and said that this person was concurrently getting licensed in another state, and being able to compare the two boards and the employees helping with the process was unbelievable. I initially was discouraged that the process in California was known to take, quote, months. However, compared to the other state, California was relatively smooth, and I felt Troy Polk was very responsive and supportive. I was confident in the California Board of Psychology and grateful as a newly licensed psychologist. Furthermore, this email alert of a board meeting has encouraged me to be involved to perpetuate the efficiencies and help other states reach similar patterns to benefit the providers and recipients for a great service in psychology. So, first of all, I think Troy's in the room because I had a chance to meet Troy earlier. So I love embarrassing people. I just want to say thank you, Troy, for demonstrating just that customer service and that service orientation, that culture of service here at the Board of Psychology, and to thank you, being one of many folks at the licensing unit, and then also just share this email because I think it does speak to the tremendous improvements that everyone has worked together, from the town hall that the leadership brought folks together on to the regular updates that you've provided us. Just thank you.
Any other board comments? I'd like to open up public comment for this item. If you have a public comment, please come forward and have a seat in front of the microphone. Doesn't look like we have any public comment. Thank you, Mr. Burke, but don't move. We're moving on to agenda item number 11. This is Organizational Improvement Office, the Internal Process Improvement Review of Licensing, Central Services, and Enforcement Units, status and improvements identified.
Thank you. This includes a PowerPoint presentation, so we're going to bring the screen down. Okay, shall I begin, President Tate?
Please.
Okay. President Tate, Vice President Rogers, members of the board. I'm here to present on some work that we've been doing with DCA's Organizational Improvement Office. It's an internal...
Bert, could you move the microphone a little closer? I'm straining. I'm getting old now.
I'm sorry. Oh. Is this better?
Yes, just get right up on the microphone.
Okay. It's the Department of Consumer Affairs Organizational Improvement Office, or OIO. It involved internal process improvement review of licensing, central services, and enforcement units. And I'm going to give you an update today on the status, as well as the improvements identified, sort of history of the project. At the time the memo was written, it hadn't been completed. It has now been completed, and the final draft document is undergoing executive review at DCA. When that comes to us, we'll then share it with everyone. But the presentation is still valid. So it's sort of a three-part process. They identify all processes, whether they are good or need improvement. Part 2, identify areas of process improvement. And Part 3, we implement the recommendations. Working with DCA's OIO, it accomplished 2 of our strategic plan goals, specifically 6.2 and 6.3, which was collaborate with DCA to review internal processes and implement recommended improvements to better serve the stakeholders of the board, and advance transition to reduce the use of paper documents to promote environmental friendliness and reduce costs over time. Slide, please. The purpose of the project is to create or update business documentation in support of the board. Anticipated business process efficiency and business activities phase consist of identifying improvement opportunities for the board's units, focusing on 5 main areas. Create and update business process documentation for current as-is processes. Create 2B business process documentation that reflect process improvement opportunities. Identify opportunities and recommend improvements within central services, enforcement and licensing, business processes and recommended process improvements. Address and recommend ways to fully utilize Breeze capabilities that can help improve process efficiency. And identify opportunities and recommend strategies for going paper light within the board. The project goal was to review and evaluate the Board of Psychology, Central Services, Enforcement and Licensing Unit business processes to identify opportunities for efficiency and improve the quality of our processes. The following initial goals were identified, and as work progressed, additional goals were added. The project goal, identify strategies and make recommendations that will help the board fully utilize Breeze capabilities. These strategies will focus on creating and promoting efficiencies within the board. Identify strategies and make recommendations that improve the quality of workflow, and identify strategies and make recommendations that will help reduce paper usages within the board. Identify strategies and make recommendations that reduce and maintain the board's processing time frame to meet statutory and regulatory requirements. And identify and make recommendations that will streamline staff productivity and reduce significant variation in workload completion. And now specific changes which each of the boards made. So in central services, OIO recommended using the process maps and narrative description of business process created by OIO in conjunction with the rules and regulations to create standardized job aids. This has helped us with onboarding of new staff. Process mapping with psychology has helped the board to retain knowledge of processes once staff has retired or left the board. And OIO recommended psychology staff use the process maps for cross-training within the central services unit. In addition, the OIO process allowed us to process map all of our Breeze-related tasks and quantify them in personnel years. This allowed management to see where staff were struggling to stay on top of the workload due to the time needed to complete the duties assigned to those positions. Additionally, the central services was able to put together a strong BCP to request 2 office technician positions to work in the central services unit to better disperse the workload of the unit. And the central services unit was able to provide additional support to the licensing unit by transferring one of those office technicians. So this came from the work of OIO process mapping. On to licensing. Next slide. provided process mapping and time study for the licensing unit to determine, if necessary, if we needed new staff in support of reducing backlog and processing times. This also assigning personnel hours to specific tasks. This was vital in us determining what our fees needed to be at, how much each individual process cost us. And that was essential information for when we were submitting the fee analysis and the fee questionnaire for our fee increase proposal. Management was able to see how staff was doing the processes and have great discussions during the mapping sessions, and were able to fine-tune the processes, various internal processes. The processes have mostly been changed to Paperlite since the staff started working from home since COVID. An additional big change is that we've utilized Breeze system more to its full potential to work with OIS to incorporate all application types into Breeze. One example, OIO was able to identify name change process as a process that could be streamlined for online submissions of application requirements, where prior to 2019 this process was a manual paper submission. Another example has been using Microsoft Teams to edit documents such as forms collaboratively, whereas previously this wasn't possible. And then in enforcement, there had been staff that had been offboarding from the unit, and we were able to document the processes on paper, which can be used to onboard new enforcement staff so that we don't lose that knowledge. And special investigations process was eliminated when the staff member left, and now the process is done by DOI, and we've retained, and we converted that position into another analyst to help with the desk workload. That completes my overview of OIO. Do you have any questions at this time?
I do. Is this a process that every board goes through with OIO every certain amount of years, or did we decide to participate because we saw some inefficiencies?
This was a process that was at the time relatively new to the department when we were drafting our strategic plan, action plan, where we were trying to meet the goals and objectives that the board put together. Once we understood that this was a process that we could utilize as a board, we reached out proactively to DCA. And it's been really, as Mr. Burke mentioned, a positive outcome, not just for our fee analysis, but understanding our staffing needs and realizing some process improvements. As we were looking at our fee structure, it was really imperative that we have a dual discussion, not just on what our fees needed to be to sustain our program, but what program efficiencies we could realize as we looked at ourselves and our processes and finding efficiencies internally that we could maintain and sustain long-term and moving forward. So it was an exciting process to be a part of because of the positive outcomes. It was very time-consuming for staff, and I just want to note that I really appreciate the staff that went through that process. It's kind of like reading a roadmap when you look at the process mapping, and I get myself lost looking at the step-by-step Breeze processes that were reviewed. So I just want to thank staff that went through that process. It was time-consuming, but hopefully you will all get the benefits of that process, being part of it.
Perfect, thank you. Sounds like there are several positive outcomes, so. Any other board comment? Mr. Fu? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Nystrom.
Just one quick question. As we talk about utilizing Breeze to its fullest extent, I'm curious if there were any additional costs to build out Breeze to accommodate that, or if that was part of. Do you want me to restate my question?
Yes, please.
Oh, as part of the Breeze, utilizing it to its fullest, ability, I'm just curious if there are additional costs to build it out to, you know, to be able to fit in the new processes, or if it was already included in the existing Breeze?
So there are some things. So with Breeze, it's a COTS item, which means commercial off the shelf. And when we transition into Breeze, it's an item that we bought as is. So there are certain things with Breeze that we can do without additional cost. If there's something that we want to change and it's considered a global change, that means that we have to provide more time and having the developer do something to change the whole system as is, because with Breeze, it's using by other boards and bureaus. So if it's something that will affect other boards and bureaus, we will have to invest in some time and money as well.
Okay, so for this example, as we're talking about using it to its fullest, it's still to be determined if you have to use additional fund, or currently the off-the-shelf is sufficient?
So with the changes that provided by OIO, there were any that we have experienced as of yet that would consider more money to make the change.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
then, Jonathan, on the Project Outcome Central Services, you talk about all Breeze-related tasks were mapped and quantified in personnel years. The personnel years, is that, can you explain that a little bit more? Thank you.
Sure. That means the amount of time it takes, say, an AGPA to do a task. If it takes that person half an hour, you can there's a formula you can apply to determine how much cost to the board that half an hour costs. So that's what we were able to calculate.
Okay, so so it'd be personnel time.
Yes.
Or year, but okay, the years just had me a little.
Sure. We talk about PY, which is staff personnel costs.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Any other board comment? Mr. Fu?
Related to Ms. Nystrom's question, and to strategic plan goal 6.3, do you have an estimated cost reduction amount? So what is, so in strategic plan goal 6.3 was to talk about transitioning over to less paper documents to promote environmental friendliness and reduce costs over time. So what is the reduction in costs over time?
That I don't know off the top of my head, but we could look to it by how long did this process take before, when it was paper heavy, and then how much time does it take paper light? The paper light should be quicker, and then with that we can calculate how much money is being saved per task.
And that's the staff time cost that you were referencing in your response to Ms. Nystrom?
Yes.
And in the second piece around the project outcomes related to central services, your presentation indicated that it justified a BCP for 2 office technicians and 1 who was transferred to licensing. Based on our earlier conversation with the budget office, we requested 2, but we got 1. Is that correct? Based on, or what fiscal year was the BCP approved, I should ask?
So, I want to say this was prior to COVID that we submitted the budget change proposal, and it was when we completed the as-is review with OIO. And I think at the time, the recommendation was that we could request 3 positions, and we ended up requesting and getting approved for 2 positions, and it was over 2 different fiscal years. So I want to say it was 2021 and 21-22 that we got the position authority for those 2 positions, and that was 1 additional position in central services. And then once we had our cashier move, we moved one of the office technician positions to licensing based on program need. So.
And the upcoming BCP that will be submitted it referenced in the previous presentation around licensure is not going to be using the evidence developed from this project outcomes and analysis. Is that correct?
It will, actually. I would say the crux of the concept paper that we will be submitting to the department in March, and I believe later in spring, when the budget change proposal will be due, we're going to use the information we got from OIO about how many staff would be needed to do the 2B process recommendations. So they did the as-is and then 2B, and the 2B is based on program efficiencies that have been identified. How many people would it take to do that more efficiently? And it was identified in that process that we would need additional personnel years to complete those processes. So that's something that will be forward, but because our fund has been in the status it has, it's not a good place to ask for positions when your deficit is looming. So once we have funding in place, and I think with legislation pending, it gets us in a better negotiating position to be able to request for those positions.
So I think I'm now better understanding the order of operations. So the budget change proposal that was for this upcoming 2023-24 budget is the $143,000 that was referenced earlier by DCA Budget Office. But the request for personnel will happen likely after statutory changes are made. So this would be looking at fiscal year 24-25 for the licensing unit.
That's correct. Budget change proposals are typically requested a fiscal year before the actual fiscal year those fund needs are realized. So for the $143,000 that you referenced, that is for the Breeze infrastructure costs to implement the psychological testing technicians. So that's the cost in Breeze, as Ms. Zhang mentioned, where we have to create an additional infrastructure that doesn't already exist. So that's why it's additional Breeze costs for us. We had to request the spending authority to build that infrastructure into the system. So that's why we had to go through a budget change proposal and get approval to get that line item money to spend. It is kind of confusing when you talk budget change proposals because it's our fund, but we have to request permission to use it.
Thank you for this morning's Schoolhouse Rock on budget change proposals. I appreciate it.
Ms. Sork, how much did you say it was costing to do the Breeze modification?
The estimate is $143,000, but it may not take that much. I think they always estimate fairly conservative, and Ms. Zhang might be able to correct me on that.
Actually, I'm not quite sure itself, but I would want to say they are more conservative with the cost, definitely.
Well, the thing that strikes me about that is given that the licensing technicians will be paying, or psych technicians will be paying such a small fee, we're incurring an enormous amount of cost to create this program that we're probably going to break even on anyway. Is that correct?
It is a one-time cost, so it's not an ongoing cost. But whenever you create a new licensure or registration category, it's an additional cost for us to pay for the Breeze system.
And I understand that. I'm not faulting staff for that.
Right.
I might fault the Breeze people for it, but let's put that to the side for the time being. How much of the licensing technicians paying for the registration? Or the
I believe
psych
the fee
technicians,
is
or whatever they're called?
$75, and it's an annual registration and renewal fee.
We're going to be collecting those for a really long time before we recoup the cost of this infrastructure change. But I guess that's government.
Thank you for your insights, Dr. Phillips. Go ahead, Dr. Harbsheets.
Are we not able to include the startup cost in the fee that we charge when we calculate that $75 fee? That's what it's costing us.
Whenever we establish fees, and this is my understanding, and please, Mr. Burke, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can only charge what it would cost to process with the personnel years. So the individual that's taking the information, putting it in the system, and calculating that time frame, that's what goes into that. Because our bottom line budget can support additional infrastructure costs, until that number were to go down, we wouldn't be able to increase the amount of that application or renewal fee unless our budget wasn't able to sustain it. So at the time when we established the number, we had to justify it through how much it would cost to process just that registration. And the one-time infrastructure costs wasn't accounted for in that, but we had the bottom line budgeting to support that 143,000. And again, that was an estimate, and it may not take all of that, but they want to give you an amount of money that, you know, if it goes over, you're not in a bad situation by having to pull from another area.
Just one more question out of curiosity. Is the $143,000 going to a non-governmental contractor, or is it going to something internal to the state government?
It's my understanding that Breeze costs are absorbed by the department, and there's a contractual relationship with the vendor and the Department of Consumer Affairs. So on the back end, they're dealing with the cost, but our costs go to Breeze, which would go to the department, because they are the ones that sustain it. If there's something that the department can't do, they would contract out to the vendor to then provide that support. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So for example, when we have a lot of more changes or configuration in the process, they do have vendors that come in and assist with the back end on the configuration part.
Any other board comment?
I have a question.
Sure.
Coming back to this OIO overview and the concept paper, my question is for Ms. Sorick, is there an opportunity at that point to give feedback to the department on some of the descriptions, some of the job descriptions and announcements? Are they adequate for what we need moving forward? That's always been a concern of mine in that when you report on staffing, like when we have a vacancy, I won't call it a staffing shortage, but when we have a vacancy, there at times it has been difficult to fill positions, and I wondered if the descriptions were outdated or too standardized to find candidates with the skills for what we need.
So one of the things I think Mr. Burke and I can attest to, anytime we have a vacancy and we're listing a staffing position, we always try and take a fresh look at duty statements. And the duty statements we want to make sure reflect what the individual actually does. I would say the position where we have had the most movement and taking a fresh look on a regular basis are the administrative level positions, which have been the most difficult to fill. It's something that management works with Office of Human Resources on, and we're in regular communication. Another example is our legislative position. That's been a couple different titles. We've been looking at the duty statement to try and get someone that is going to be able to do the job and trying to find someone with a certain skill set to support that and those needs. So, yes, that's something that Mr. Burke and I are in regular communication on. We work with Office of Human Resources on that, and I would say the duty statement is probably not where we find the biggest challenge. It's just trying to find enough interested parties that are interested in the positions, and it is a department-wide problem. I hear about it at the directors' meetings with other programs. It's something that everybody's kind of aware of. I think there are pay issues. We look at how much admin level people make, and I hate to say this, but you can go outside and, I always say, be a manager at In-N-Out and probably make more money than you would make being an office technician for the department. And it's a difficult position to be in, and I sympathize with the individuals that are applying for these positions. We often call candidates and we have lots of no-shows, or people don't even call us back, and we're lucky if we get 4 or 5 people that are interested in interviewing. So it's, sorry to put a downer on the conversation, but it's been challenging. But at the same time, we've lucked out with, that 1 or 2 candidates that are great, and we're lucky to have them at the right place at the right time and apply for our board. So, thank you.
Any other board comment before I open it up for public comment? Okay, I'd like to open up this agenda item for public comment. If you do have a comment, please come forward and we will find a microphone for you. I'm seeing no public comment. Thank you to both of you. I appreciate the presentation. We're moving on to agenda item number 12. This is the Licensure Committee report and consideration of committee recommendations. The chairperson for this committee is Dr. Harpsheets. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning again, board member and legal counsel. I'm Mai.
Can you pull the microphone just
Okay.
closer?
Oh, I didn't know it could do that. Or maybe I'll just speak louder. How about that? Okay, great.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'll be presenting about the licensing report. And the licensing reports, we have a couple brief updates. We have the new application for psychologists to be placed in retired status with the option to pay. And the application was available and have been configured to Breeze as of January 5th, 2023. We also made conforming changes relating to the continuing professional development, which was previously known as continuing education for the psychologist renewal. Moving on to attachment A, which is the licensing population report. We added the new retired license column as of 1/1/2023, which is recorded in the attachment A. We have 11 approved retired status, but I'll provide a more recent number. As of this morning, we have 39 approved licensees in retired status and 16 pending application for the retired license. And then moving on to attachment B, starting with the psychologist application workload report. We noticed there are a slight fewer applications toward the end of the year for the exam eligible for each P and the complete. Possibly it could be due to the holidays, so there were just less application in those 2 months. For the complete retake application, you will see the jump in the month of July and October, and that is because the exam candidates that are allowed to take the complete once per quarter. So if they did not pass the complete and they resubmit a new complete retake application prior to the next quarter of their exam attempt date, then we will process those new resubmission, complete retake application in the following quarter that they'll be eligible to retake the complete exam. And the quarter goes by calendar year, so it'll be January, April, July, and October. And then on the psychological associate application workload report, the initial application and the change of supervisor request seem to fluctuate across the 6-month timeframe provided on the chart. I can provide the average for each of those, which is the psychological associate application is about 90 days overall in the 6-month timeframe, and then the change of supervisor notification is 53. Moving on to attachment C, it provides the number of new application and notification received in the last 12-month period. In comparison to the same 12-month period in 2021 and 2022, there is an increase of 234 psychologist application, 24 psychological associates application, and a decrease of 63 notification. Then move along to attachment D. As John previously mentioned and presented on the application processing timeframe, the chart show a decreasing trend and the average processing timeframes. When looking at the chart, please note that the timeframes are in business days. Overall, we believe that the implementation of the short-term and beginning states of the long-term solution previously presented by John really helped with the decrease of the overall timeframe dates. And that will conclude my licensing reports. I'll be glad to assist with or answer any questions. Dr. Harpsheets?
Earlier, let me tell you what attachment, you were talking about the psychological associate, and you mentioned some numbers. It's attachment B. And when you were talking about like 53 days, and I forget what the other one was, and I'm trying to understand what those days referred to, since it seems the processing time is so much quicker. So could you clarify that, please, ma'am?
Oh, that's just the overall average across the 6 months, since there's no trend in the chart and it's fluctuating. So I just provided an average days for those 6 months.
Oh, okay. Because currently it sounds like it's like a week or so.
Yeah, so that's
correct?
not the time. That's just the overall application that was processed.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
the number.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Thank you for your report. I'm just impressed that the retirees, those 39 people, jumped right on board after January 1st. That was impressive. Any other board comment?
Thanks for filling in for Ms. Chung.
Yeah, no problem.
Dr. Harpsheets, would you like me to take public comment at this time, or do you want to go through all of your items?
Yeah, I think it's good to take public comment before we move on to continuing education.
Okay. Do you want me to do it, or you?
Yes. You want to ask for public
Sorry.
comment?
Any public comment for this item? This is regarding the licensing report. Please come forward and have a seat in front of the microphone. And pull it towards you a little bit so we can hear you.
Okay. I actually just have a question. I'm not familiar with the retirement status for licensure, and is there a benefit to registering for that status?
So the retire license status was effective 1/1/2023, and previously we don't have a retire license status. So if a licensee wants to no longer provide services and basically get out of the license or the career, they would place either the option they would have would either be cancel their license or put their license in inactive status. But with inactive status, they would still have to pay the fee and I believe still renew every month, so every year, every 2 years. So with that, with that, it's a little bit difficult for those licensees that no longer want to practice or provide services, and going to a status that would basically put them in a retired status. So we were working on the regulation package to be able to have that status for them, so then they would have license status that they would go on, and they wouldn't have to do other maintenance, for example, for the paying the biannual fee and such.
All right, and just to,
I just was going to add to that, for psychologists who did not want to go on to inactive status, because Ms. Jung said that you would have to pay a fee and that they would not pay. They would just not pay. It would go into a delinquent status, and then it would be canceled, which somebody looking in at verifying a license would go, oh, I wonder why that person's license was canceled. And at least with retired status, it provides sort of a more honorable way of exiting the profession that just honors our time during being a psychologist.
thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other questions, any other public comment at this time? Okay, thank you. We're going to, did you answer something? No. We're going to be moving on to the continuing education and renewals report. Go ahead.
Hi. Oh, well, good morning. Okay, so my name is Lizelle, and I am the Continuing Professional Development and Renewals Coordinator, and I'll be presenting the CPD and Renewals Update. So the pass rate for January 2022 through June 2022 CE audits is 73%, with 27% of psychologists failing the CE audit. The main reason cited for failing the audit was mostly related to concerns around the COVID-19 pandemic, such as office closures and inability to access or reproduce certificates, or an assumption that the live requirement was waived. The pass rate from 2017 through 2021 has been consistently over 80%, and the pass rate for second audits has been over 80% since 2017, with a 100% pass rate in 2021 and 2022. For renewals processed in 2022, 82% of psychologists renewed as active. Approximately 91% of psychologists and psychological associates renewed their license online using Breeze per month. So I'm going to provide a quick update on CPD. I just first wanted to provide some background on why CPD was created. Back in 2012, the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards presented a new model of continuing education, the Continuing Professional Development Model. That same year, the legislator wanted to know the board's efforts in continuing competency. The board's response to this was that it was working to replace the single requirement of traditional continuing education courses with a more robust continued competency model. Thus, CPD was born. This model consists of 15 continuing professional development activities grouped under 4 different categories. CPD is a broader concept referring to the continuing development of the multifaceted abilities needed for quality professional performance in one's area of practice. I'm going to now provide actions that the board has taken and will take to notify licensees and stakeholders of the new requirements. The board has posted and emailed the CPD information. Web pages on the board's website has been updated. An FAQ is being created, and it will be used to clarify these requirements using questions from licensees. You can expect the FAQs to be posted sometime this month. Back in August 2022, board representatives attended an informational webinar held by the California Psychological Association, and the board will also be hosting our own informational webinar, which will be held on February 27th and March 3rd. I strongly suggest for licensees to subscribe to the board's email alerts for information regarding the webinars. You can do so on our website. Attending this board meeting counts for CPD credit. your attendance is recorded by signing in on the sign-in sheet located at the entrance. Please also keep record of attendance by listing today's date, the name of the meeting, which is a board meeting, and the number of hours attended. I will also be sending a certificate to those who have signed in. This concludes my CPD and renewals report, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any board member questions? Dr. Rogers?
Quick question for you. For the informational webinars that will be taking place, if people can't attend on those dates, will those be posted on the website, or will people be able to access the recordings from those webinars to get that information?
I believe they will be recorded, and so we'll just have them posted on our website.
And I think, just kind of following up on this and thinking out loud a little bit, which could be scary. For those that don't participate in the live webinar, those individuals should be able to count participation after not live and interactive as self-study. I just want to clarify that if it's something that they participate live and interactive, it would be considered like a board activity. And then if they're going online after it's taken place and they're not able to ask questions or have that kind of interactive experience, that would be a self-study activity.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and they for the informational webinars, the attendees will be receiving 2 hours of credit for their laws and ethics, towards their laws and ethics requirement. So,
and just one more item on that. When someone logs into a WebEx webinar, there's an ability for us to capture their name and information in the system so that we can see how long the person participated.
And you might want to add, if they log in with just a phone number, did we ask them to also, like, how did we do that?
yeah, they would email me with their phone number and then their license number, and I could record their attendance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Cervantes?
It would be good, not now, but in the future, to hear from you about actions that you're taking when you do audits, for example, under CPD, like how it'll be different. It would be good to hear from you on those things in the future.
I'm wondering if you could also speak for a moment to, you were alluding to, I think some of us, particularly licensed people who hear I see it as a relatively low pass rate this last year for audits, first-time audits. I'm looking at Dr. Phillips, who's nodding too. And I know we've talked about it regarding people not going to offices and picking up mail. And I know that you have also worked really hard to send them emails, to contact, and those of us who've been audited have benefited from that. Maybe if you could just share with everyone how important it is for people to keep updated addresses, including email addresses, with the board.
So, yeah, the information we have on Breeze, that you input in Breeze, it's our contact information. So with any disciplinary actions, anything from the board, we utilize that information that the licensees provided us. So it's very important that licensees log on to Breeze and update their contact information. The letters and contact letters are usually sent to the address of records, which is a public address, and it's also sent to the emails that we have on file for the board.
Thanks. I know that you work hard to get a hold of people so that you give them every chance, and they get 60 days to respond. So I know they get every chance to pass these audits.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any public comment? Okay. Oh, we had one more board comment, but Dr. Horn, have a seat.
I'm always happy to yield to Dr. Horn. I can ask my comment afterwards.
Oh, you'll wait. Okay, Mr. Fu. Dr. Horn. Oh,
I'm also always happy to listen to Dr. Horn when she tells me I should make my comment first, which is a question really about the analysis around your audit pass and fail rates. So, the board memo noted that folks were referencing an assumption that the live requirement had been waived in, various pandemic circumstances. I'm curious, though, when we compare it to 21 and 2020, when there was, obviously the stay-at-home order in 2020 and then the pre-vaccine period, we did see a fairly high pass rate for 2020 and 21 referencing attachment D. So I'm curious, aside from the reasons that folks are sharing with you directly, can you dig a little bit deeper to help illuminate why we're seeing a lower pass rate perhaps in the first 6 months or given January 22 to June 2022?
I assume the reason the pass rates were significantly different is because there was a waiver the whole time. It was just a waiver that allowed them more time to complete their CEs. I think that the people in 2020 were probably more aware of the waiver than those in 2021. And then those in 2020 had until 2022 to finish. So that's what I think would contributed to the higher pass rate.
I think there's a lot of confusion among licensees as to what constitutes a live CE course. They believe it's going someplace and being with people, whereas being in a seminar that's synchronous in time by virtual means is a live course. Although some of these problems will slip away now that we have moved to the CPD model. There's no distinction made in CE, if I recall correctly, between live and non-live, right?
in CPD, right?
In
No
CPD, well, in the
distinction.
continuing education portion of CPD.
Yeah.
And just the webinar that you reference, I understand that there's the 2-hour credit, but it is being recorded so that folks can access it after or even refer to it. Not necessary for self-study, but a refresher perhaps.
Right, correct.
Dr. Horn.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited that the CPD model is in effect. And I'm really happy to be here earning my CPD credit for coming to a board meeting. So, it's quite exciting to me. I have a couple of questions. I'm a member of the California Psychological Association, and I'm on their listserv. There have been a number of questions coming through on their listserv that I think y'all are probably better able to answer about what's going to count and what's not going to count. So I'm hoping, in part by saying this, that people will send their questions into the board, or I know there are board members who are also on that listserv. If y'all would kind of maybe take account of some of those questions,
I think Dr. Winkleman is going to give input to us, too, about what CPA is
Great.
hearing also.
Great.
So I think, yes, I think that's important, because I read those, too.
Yeah.
And they are good questions.
So, and then the other thing I want to say is that, you said that people could email you their names and everything if they're just calling in. Are you going to put the instructions there for like what your email address is and how people can do it and all like that?
Yeah, so on WebEx meetings, we'll make sure to have that on screen
Perfect.
for them to follow.
Yeah. Okay, thank y'all.
Dr. Horn, we had a licensing meeting in January, and we had quite a few people who were there for CPD credit, and I know, Lisa, we did put that on screen. We kind of learned something through that. Yeah. Thank you.
I will also say, having received the CPA listserv emails, some people will go through discussing whether something should or should not. They'll actually look at the regulations, get the answer, and then say, well, that doesn't seem right.
That was this
So
week.
a lot of people are kind of second guessing the system, even though they know what the answer to their question is.
I read that, too. Yes, Mr. Fu.
Just for context, for folks listening in, for our audience, I think the reason why there was such exuberation when Dr. Horn spoke about CPD was because when she, as a former member of the Board of Psychology, a former chair of the licensure committee, and along with Dr. Phillips and others, led the continuing professional development change in regs for, it was a decade-plus long process. So the exuberance felt is one of relief, I think. But also, I think just an acknowledgement of the service that board members, both past and present, have led to CPD. And so just want to put some context to why we were celebrating.
I will also say that I'm getting a lot of emails from people that are going, now that I look at the system, this is going to be fairly easy for me to do. And it's like, yeah, we tried to tell you that before, but people are afraid of change. Even psychologists are afraid of change, even though we're supposed to help people change. So, I think it's natural that people are resistant to those kinds of changes, but I think most people will find it's going to be much easier for them to get their CPD hours if they're actively engaged with the psychology community.
I think so. Yes, additional public comment?
I wonder if we could put some of those questions that are vetted by the board on the facts on the website, just so we can have that as a resource. Be
Yes,
very
we will be putting together an FAQ. Ms. McCochran, when do you think that will come out?
This month.
This month, okay.
Thank
There you
you.
go. Okay, any other public comment on continuing education and continuing professional development? Okay, well, we'll move on to the examination report. Ms. Snyder? This is item 12C.
Good morning. My name is Lavinia Snyder. I am the examination coordinator for the Board of Psychology. I'm reporting on agenda item 12C, examination report. You'll have the chart, the table for the examination for professional practice in psychology, which is the national exam developed by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards and administered by Pearson VUE. The exam tests candidates' general knowledge in psychology, and it is one of the required exams for licensure. So overall, the table will show that there is a 39 pass rate for the EHPP for the year 2022, and an overall first-time pass rate of 61% for first-timers. The next chart would give you, it depicts the pass rate statistics for the EHPP for the past 3 years for 2020, 2021, and 2022. At the beginning of 2022, we show a downward trend of pass rates compared to the past years. Candidates did slightly better in August, November, and December of 2022 compared to last year, 2021 months. The next exam required in California is the California Psychology Laws and Ethics examination. It's a state-owned exam developed by the Department of Consumer Affairs, Office of Professional Examination Services, and administered by PSI Inc. The exam tests candidates on their knowledge of APA Code of Conduct and the board's laws and regulations. So the table you have shows the overall pass rate and first-time pass rate for the year 2022, which is, overall pass rate is 77%, and then the overall first-time pass rate is 78%. You'll also have a chart that shows how the CPLEE did for the past 3 years. And the CPLEE pass rate seemed to be consistent over the past 3 years with no noticeable deviation. So that concludes my report, and open up for questions.
Any board questions or comments? Sir, Dr. Cervantes.
I just want to say that I like the way the format used in this report. and the comparison year by year and month by month, it's helpful to understand and have better context. Thank you for that.
Any
Any
other?
other
Yes.
questions?
Oh, hi.
Ms. Nystrom.
Yes, I guess I'm always, and I've raised this in licensing as well, but the low pass rate for the EPPP, and I think in our discussions previously, it's been, it's lower maybe than the national average, and we've pointed to maybe a couple of different reasons, but if you could maybe highlight a couple of those reasons for us, that'd be helpful.
I mean, there could be a number of reasons for the low pass rate for the EPPP. Of course, you know, during the pandemic, we obviously showed a downward trend because of that pandemic. Also, ASPPB, Mr. Turner gave us some information regarding possible reasons why we have a low pass rate. Nationally, according to that information, national pass rates for first-time test takers have been around 82% for candidates from accredited programs and 55% for candidates from non-accredited programs, with a combined first-time pass rates of 75%. So we also requested California pass rates from accredited programs and non-accredited programs, and it appears that according to their data, we have a 71% pass rate from accredited programs, and for non-accredited programs, it's 41%.
Okay, I think that's important information for the.
And I am trying to get an updated number from ASPPB, so as soon as I have those numbers, I will provide them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Dr. Phillips?
So when you say the pass rate is substantially lower for non-accredited programs, are you talking about the graduate programs that were traditionally, what were they called, California approved or something?
Not regionally accredited versus APA accredited?
Or are you making the distinction between APA accreditation and non-APA accreditation?
That's correct.
Okay, so that, it's the latter.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
And I think California is one of the few states that allows people to be licensed who have graduated from regionally accredited and not APA accredited programs.
That's what confused me, because they are actually accredited, they're just not
Yeah,
accredited.
It's not APA accredited. Yes, yeah. Oh, and Mr. Fu?
I'm curious, I know this is another agenda item that we'll have, but there's a conversation about changing the timing for when a person can take the EPPP. And I'm curious, based on what Dr. Turner, who used to be at ASPPB, shared, I wonder if we can get information from them with regard to states that do allow EPPP to be taken, the Part 1 exam, to be taken at a more flexible time at the applicant's discretion, let me say it that way, versus states that don't have that discretion. I would be curious to understand if there's a difference in passage rates. And then secondly, would be curious to hear your own thoughts to see if there is such a change, successful statutory change to that, if you would imagine a change in potentially passage rates as well.
Oh, we're way ahead of you. I've already gotten a directive from Antoinette regarding those questions, and we've already reached out to ASPPB about those stats.
Go ahead. Are there any other board questions or comments? Okay. Any public comment? Dr. Horn, and then, I'm sorry. Dr. Gaker. Okay. Either one. Mhm.
My question is, are there trends in the areas of the exam that are, do you see any trends for pass rates with regard to the areas of the exam?
Not that I'm aware of right now.
So this is the subject matter areas in the exam.
Right.
It's a good question.
That would be helpful in if they're not accredited to the APA standard, or if they're regionally accredited, we could at least be able to focus on the area that there's a deficiency.
We can
certainly look into that,
Yeah. Maybe Dr. Horn will have some input on if that information is available too.
Thank y'all. So now I'm going to put on a different hat as someone who works with the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. So first thing, I just wanted to address the question about accreditation. Regional accreditation is not program accreditation. So program accreditation would be APA or the Canadian Psychological Association. And that's what we're talking about in the pass rate difference. Program accreditation versus institutional accreditation. So,
Yeah, thank you for that distinction.
okay. So then the other thing about, in terms of the subject matter question, we don't get that. I mean, that's not information. It's given to people who don't pass the exam. They're given a breakdown of where they didn't, what their score was in each of the 8 domains. So in part, because it's just a score, they get the passing score is 500, and that's what the candidate gets if they've passed. If they haven't passed, then they get a breakdown of, so it would have to be taken out in a different way, but that's,
So that information must be available then, right? If they're sending it to the candidates.
Well, it goes through the scoring system, so it's not like ASPPB necessarily
I
sees
see.
it.
It's the
But is
organization
there
that.
any way to compile that data
That's,
into one?
I think that's something that ASPPB would probably have to get from Pearson
Right.
for
Or Pearson,
candidates who
Pearson.
don't pass.
Okay.
So, but I'm not sure. So, you could ask Dr. Song, who I think y'all will be meeting maybe in April when you have, or maybe at the next board meeting, who's taken Dr. Turner's place, will be able to answer that. And I'm sure you've been communicating with her or started communicating with her.
Actually, I have not. I've only been communicating with Christy right now.
Oh, Christy.
I haven't met Dr. Song.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dr. Song.
Okay.
Dr. House Song. Okay, and then about the part 1 earlier, I'm glad you're working with ASPPB to get that information. Just to let y'all know in general, though, no jurisdiction that only gives the part 1 until after graduation. So that means it can't be taken until the internship year is done.
So full graduation, coursework
Correct.
and internship.
Correct. Courses and internships.
And
So that
dissertation.
means the soonest in any jurisdiction, if they're only using the part 1, that it can be taken is upon graduation. So that means during their postdoc year or when they're waiting between internship or postdoc, they might take it then. But that's the soonest they can take it. So there are only, right now, about 4 states that are giving both parts of the exam. Those states, there are 8 jurisdictions altogether, but like 4 or 5 states, because we include Canada. So,
And they're giving the part 1 and 2 as part of the licensing process.
as part of the licensing process. So they're the only ones that would be moving, if they haven't moved already, to give the part 1
Earlier.
upon
Prior to
completion of
graduation.
coursework.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it, okay.
So,
Sorry.
just so I'm clear, the earlier eligibility, which would be coursework completion and not a degree granted,
Correct.
you would have to be an opt-in to the Part 2 to be able to utilize that early eligibility.
Right.
Because as we'll see tomorrow, when we talk about CPA's proposal, coursework completion is part of that proposal, but that's contingent on EPPP 2 being in the picture. Okay, thank you. That's
That's
helpful.
what ASPPB is recommending. I mean, you know, because it's,
So there's no infrastructure in place right now with ASPPB to allow for, so right now, we have, our national exam is EPPP Part 1. That's meeting the requirement.
right.
If our statute changes, or were to change to say, once you get your coursework completed, then you could be eligible to take the Part 1 for ASPPB, that would not be okay. You would tell the candidate, no, you're going to have to wait until the degree is granted. No.
Because you're
We
saying
can't
it's
do
just
that.
You have a
That-
recommendation.
that's only
but
our
it's not a rule.
recommendation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I was thinking that you had to be in the Part 2 in order to take advantage of that early eligibility, but no.
That's our
not.
recommendation, and I'll tell you, that's how it is currently. Okay.
But it's only a recommendation. It's
Right.
not a rule.
We can't make rules for,
Right, others.
or ASPPB can't make rules for boards.
I just want to clarify, the recommendation from ASPPB on the Part 1 is to complete the degree or to complete the coursework?
To complete the coursework.
So they might still be in dissertation.
But no, that's only if they have, it's a state that
They
has-
may still
takes
be
two parts.
completing, still may be writing their dissertation. They still might be in their internship. That's fine, because you have to complete both of those before you get your degree in an accredited program. So if they have all their coursework done, though, excluding internship and dissertation, ASPPB is recommending that's the time to take the Part 1.
And is that just for states that are doing Part 1 and Part 2? And is it different for people who are just doing Part 1? Has that recommendation changed? Because it used to be graduation.
ASPPB just made that for jurisdictions that are doing both. Y'all can move toward that ahead of time if you wanted to, because you have other culminating things that you do. Now the EPPP isn't the only culminating thing you have, the Part 1, so y'all could move toward that.
Right.
Say,
I was just
if
wondering.
you wanted to.
If the initial recommendation from ASPPB that people take the EPPP, which was just one part, after graduation.
Correct.
For those states that are still offering just Part 1, that recommendation is maintained.
It's still in place.
It's still in place.
Yeah. That hasn't been changed.
Dr. Phillips?
Hello, Dr. Horn. I assume then it's based on the assumption that the closer you are to your coursework, the better prepared you are to take Part 1.
Well, and in fact, we know that's true. We've done our own research on that, and we know that the closer you are to the time your coursework is completed, the higher the pass rate. So that's the recommendation, because the Part 1 is a test of knowledge.
Right.
And so, yeah.
I think for some programs, there's a gap between what is being taught and what's being tested for on the Part 1. But I don't say that as a criticism of either the programs or the test. It's just, I think it depends on the program to some extent. But it doesn't surprise me that people would do better at that point.
The closer they are. And in fact, jurisdictions that there are jurisdictions that license at the master's level, and those people can take the EPPP for that master's licensure, and, they do pretty well. Yeah. At the master's level. They may not pass at the doctoral level because there's more, still more to learn, but they have a pretty high pass rate at the master's pass rate level. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Horn. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. Any other board comments? No? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Snyder. We will move on to item 12D, board response to psychologist applications. That's the correspondence with applicants. And Mai, would you like to walk us through, and as board members, I would request that as you see these revised correspondence templates that Dr. Cervantes and I worked with Ms. Chung on, that what we would like to see is, as a board, are you willing to offer your seal of approval on these? I know we don't have to have any kind of a motion, but we would appreciate that kind of feedback. And if you don't, that's okay too. We'll go back to the drawing board. So, Ms. Chung, thank you.
Hello again. So here we have on the screen the EPPP approval email templates. And with these templates, we provide the file ID number, which we use internally, and also the next step on how to register for the exam. And this will let them know that they are approved and qualified to take the EPPP. And that will be the first step towards the licensure process.
Oh, can I point out one thing?
Yeah.
You will see right under the paragraph, right under file ID number, there's a link to this flow chart overview, which is at the end of your packet here. And that not only gives them the step-by-step, but takes them to a flow chart so they can see visually what this process looks like. And we inserted that there.
Yeah, so that was a change we made at the January 2023 meeting. And so that was input there. And I think that's really helpful because the flowchart is really fluid and it really helps visually on the licensure process.
Just one comment here with regard to this. It would be, I wonder if we can just, the phrase "you will be expected to," if folks are just amenable, just say, please read this message. You will be expected to just has a slightly different tone to it. And I think if you want to successfully complete this process, you will read through it. And I just think just saying, please read this message sounds more welcoming and supportive rather than a...
I think it's important to convey that you can't come back and say, I didn't read that. So if you say, it is important that you read this, that isn't quite as harsh.
Yeah, that sounds great too. Yeah, I think just, there's a different way to say that, I think.
I understand.
What's the Troy Polk way is my philosophy.
Okay. Okay.
And Mr. Fu, do you recommend that just on this one or all of the templates?
Yeah, all of them.
All of them, okay.
You don't want to hear from me anymore, trust me.
So I've read through these letters. I feel like I've seen these for months. So I love the changes. I think it's much clearer, much better than what we had before. So thank you. And
So Dr. Tate, are you encouraging us to not go through all the detail of them because we've had them in our packet?
I feel like I've seen them in a packet
We have.
for months.
We have. I feel like we have
but-
because we've been looking at
Yes,
them.
yeah, and maybe I'm the only one who feels like that.
And you've seen them in the licensure committee
Yes.
too.
So I kind of like what Mr. Fu just did. He pulled out something and said, no, you did great.
I think that's a
and
good way
throughout,
of
so I just-
approaching this rather than going
Yes,
through
because we just
the
went through them
detail
all
of each
in
one.
November, and so I don't know if that's.
And January.
Yep.
So, okay, let's do this then. Since we've had these in your board packets, are there any other comments from board members as you've looked them over that you'd like us to pay attention to and discuss? Mr. Fu?
I lied. I thought I had no more comments. Can I make a suggestion on the flow chart? On looks like it's page 88 on my end.
What is it, 88?
88 out of 163.
Can we get that on the screen?
Page 88? Is that what you're asking, Evan?
88.
That's only the template, so if you,
This is where the Jeopardy music is always so helpful to just have on hand.
Yeah, looks clean, looks clean.
so it's 12D attachment B.
Mr. Food, you want, oh, here it is, okay.
Awesome. So I will join the chorus in saying I love the flow chart. So a couple, just on specifically around the supervised professional experience section, I wonder if there's a way where you can actually have the headline number be 3,000 hours of SPE, of which, and then underneath that, you list 1,500 hours of SPE earned pre or postdoc, and 1,500, at least 1,500 earned postdoc. And the reason why I say that, because right now, if you were looking at these numbers, I think the person who did not meet those expectations set forth in the letter would go, oh, I would need 4,500 hours of SPE, because you're pulling out these numbers equally in size from a design framework. So if you're doing 3,000 as the big number and then doing 1,500 and 1,500 underneath, I think it adds clarity to
So
it.
maybe like the first line being total 3,000 hours, and then underneath 1,500 pre, 1,500 post, explaining that. So it's really clear it's a total of 3,000, and they have to be met these
Yeah.
ways.
That's my reading of it as one of, so.
People nod their head.
And then the second thing is more of a design suggestion, which is on the second page of this document, you are referencing back EPPP, complete, and request for initial licensure, but your icons are different. And so from a continuity perspective, it would be helpful to use the icons on page 88 at the top. If you go further up, see where you do the,
EPPP.
right, so if you have those icons for continuity, actually, it would help brain connections to not only use the same colors if possible, but at least the same icons at minimum between the two
idea.
documents.
Great
That's
idea.
good.
Thank you. Okay. Any other board comments?
I have a few, other than the design notes that Mr. Fu mentioned. This was, I thought this was well executed in terms of helping people see the process in one shot. It also has an as-of date at the bottom, and information to contact us, the Board of Psychology, and then also connects us to the bigger brand of DCA. I don't know if this is a place to have the updated logo that DCA just announced, but I just think those are best practices in creating publications like this. And I do want to, I don't, Mr. Fu's two points usually would not have gotten by me, but I had not noticed those two things that you pointed out. So, very, very well done. Thank you all.
Dr. Rogers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fu, for your design expertise. I had not caught those, and so now I'm looking at it with that lens. So I'm looking at page 88, and if you look at the three categories, the first one says how to qualify for a psychology license. The subcategory is pre-licensure courses, but for the one with supervised professional experience, there's no title on that. So I'm just thinking if Mr. Fu said, put 3,000 at the top and then the subcategories, we should also have a header there.
Excellent. Thank you. Very good. Good marketing people.
We've been all taking Ms. Riscati's classes.
This $100 per diem is really spreading pretty far. Thank you.
Keeping up with that embarrassing people streak.
Any other board comments on these correspondence templates? Any public comment on the correspondence templates?
I had a comment.
Okay.
Dr. Harpsheets, I had
Oh,
a
there-
quick
oh.
comment. I was just wondering for the flow process in 89. I'm just wondering if there's like some kind of time frame for the flow, because it says like the board will contact you via email, but there's not like within a month of when you complete this task.
Oh, Ms. Riscati, I think in some of the letters, we let them know that every 2 weeks, we update it. You can look at the timeframes online at this location.
Oh, okay. So I think maybe having a note somewhere there, because you know how people are. The first thing they'll be like, when, where, who, and then they'll start emailing and.
So possibly providing the link to the processing time frame as well?
Yeah, we could do that.
Anything that will reduce questions and emailing and. going
Yeah,
back and forth.
maybe where it says materials current, on this one says as of 11/10/22, for current, right, just right next to it, it's at the bottom of page 88. Right next to that, we can say for current processing timeframes. And then that gives them another place to see that.
Yeah, no, that sounds good, because I think
Yeah.
our processing timeframes may fluctuate.
They
So we don't want
fluctuate,
to have to
yeah.
promise
Yeah,
something
and
that we can't
they're
deliver.
updated pretty regularly, so that's good. Okay, now, is the board ready to, with the changes that have been suggested, ready to accept these and move forward with them?
I am ready
You are ready?
to
Nod
accept
your
all of
head.
these amazing changes and move forward with the new templates.
I-
And I know we don't need a motion, but
No, we
I'm
don't.
saying we are ready.
Yeah.
And I'm
Okay.
speaking on everybody.
You're
We-
speaking on behalf of everybody,
We're all
okay.
ready.
I agree, I agree. Okay.
Chung really missed the good meeting.
I know, right.
Dr. Tate,
I know.
I would actually like to codify this document in our regulations and do a line by line.
Oh, gee.
If everyone would like to stay after with Mr. Fu at 5 PM and go line by line, you're welcome to do that. Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to item 12E.
Dr. Harpsheets,
Oh.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. As you mentioned, I know a formal motion is not required since this is standard staff practice in terms of updating the correspondence, but I do know that staff would appreciate a formal motion just by virtue of the fact that this item's been brought before the board for
okay,
their review.
that's fine.
So if we could do that.
Okay. Can I make the motion? Okay,
Absolutely.
So I make the motion that we accept these templates as modified today at this meeting as correspondence to applicants for licensure.
I second.
Dr. Cervantes seconds. Okay, Ms. Proto, will you call the roll?
I think you need now public comment now because there's a motion.
Oh, yeah, we need comment. Sorry. Okay. Board comments? I don't see any. Pardon me? And any public comment?
Last but not least, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Harpshe and Dr. Cervantes for working with staff on these templates. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready. Ms. Proto?
Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harpsheets?
Aye.
Nystrom? Aye. Phillips?
Aye.
Riscate?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 12E. We have a meeting, and I'll ask Ms. Sork if she wants to add to this. It's just an update that the task force for EPPP2 is going to meet towards the end of April, and we'll be moving forward and reporting to the board on the results of that meeting at the May 19th board meeting. And Ms. Sork, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just that it'll be April 28th, the EPPP Ad Hoc Committee, which is chaired by Dr. Kasuga, and the committee will report out WebEx meeting on May 19th. Both the committee meeting and the board meeting will be held live interactive on WebEx. And for CPD credit.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Dr. Tate.
You want to do board comment and public comment for that item?
Oh, yes, thank you for doing that.
You are so welcome.
Any board comment? Seeing none, any public comment on item 12E? Seeing none, Dr. Tate.
Perfect. We're going to take one item out of order before we break for lunch. This will be agenda item 16C, the regulatory update, review, and consideration of additional changes. This is Dr. Cervantes, please.
All right. Let me see. We have, this is an information item, and item 6C, the regulatory update, is found on page 105 of the combined package. Mr. Burke?
President Tate, Vice President Rogers, members of the board. This item, as Dr. Cervantes mentioned, is informational. So it's just an update on the various packages that we have. So the update on the inactive psychological associate registration and the reactivation of the psych associate is still in the initial phase. And that's the same for all of these. The disciplinary guidelines, we're still drafting that one. And then the pathways to licensure is still being drafted, and then the enforcement provisions is also being drafted as well. Are there any questions?
Any board questions? Thank you, Mr. Burke. Tomorrow we'll have more discussion on legislation or legislative and regulatory affairs. Is there any public comment on this item, this update?
Thank you, Dr. Cervantes. At this time, the board will meet in closed session to discuss disciplinary matters, including petitions for reinstatement, modifications, or early termination, proposed decisions, stipulations, petitions for reconsideration and remands. We will only be coming back to open session after closed session to end the meeting for today. And just as a reminder, as you are on your way out, if you are here for CPD, please make sure you sign out with Ms. McCochran. And thank you for coming this morning, and hope to see many of you tomorrow.